They demanded her to strip her uniform, then froze when they saw the tattoo, feared by everyone. She wore no medals, no dress uniform, just a simple jacket and faded jeans as she stepped quietly into the courthouse. No one paid her much mind, until an officer demanded she strip her jacket, doubting her place there. Without hesitation, she obeyed, and as the fabric slipped aside, a massive serpent tattoo coiled across her back, an emblem whispered about in classified circles, feared by enemies, and respected by those who knew the truth. That ink wasn't just art. It was the mark of a shadow operator whose missions were erased from history. In that moment, the courtroom fell silent, and a veteran's hidden legacy was finally revealed, demanding respect not through words, but through the weight of untold sacrifice. Just a quick little pause before I forget. If you like this kind of stories of overcoming adversity and justice, please leave a like and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to our channel so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. I guarantee you won't want to miss it. Now let's jump back in. It started like a routine inspection. The county courthouse was packed, a line of people stretched down the marble hallway. Civilians clutching paperwork, officers checking IDs, and security making sure no one skipped protocol. It was the kind of place where no one noticed the quiet ones, where the loudest got the attention and the still ones melted into the walls. She stood in line near the back, alone. No phone, no earbuds, no company. Just a pressed khaki uniform. Not police. Not military. Civilian contractor, maybe. Maintenance division, that was the assumption. The patch on her arm was faded and unfamiliar. The boots were worn but polished. Her hair was tied back in a simple braid. Her gaze never met anyone else's. She looked forgettable, until Officer Rudd spotted her. He was young, eager, always needing to assert his role, the kind who'd demand respect before earning it. He'd been assigned checkpoint duty for the day, badge freshly pinned, voice a little louder than it needed to be. Next, he barked, waving her forward. She stepped up without hesitation. Quiet steps. Precise. He glanced over her uniform with a smirk. No ID badge visible, he said. She reached into her pocket and handed him a laminated card. He held it up toward the light, inspecting it longer than necessary. Rudd frowned. This clearance looks outdated. What department are you with? Facilities, she said simply. Her voice was calm, controlled. No effort to impress. He scoffed. Yeah? Then why the boots? Military issue. And this, he tapped a patch on her sleeve, isn't any division I recognize. A few people glanced over. Most ignored it. Just another moment of small authority flexing itself. But something in her silence made one older man, a retired Marine in line for veteran paperwork, raise an eyebrow. Rudd wasn't done. You'll need to remove the jacket. Dress code requires all ID and clearance to be visible at all times. She didn't move. He crossed his arms. Ma'am, remove the jacket. There was no aggression in her face, only stillness. But something shifted in the air. That quiet, uneasy kind of stillness, like the moment before a storm. Rudd's tone sharpened when she didn't respond. I said remove the jacket. Now, he wasn't used to being ignored, especially not by someone who, by his judgment, was just another maintenance tech trying to coast through on a dusty badge. And the longer she stood there, the more attention they attracted. Phones lowered. Conversations quieted. The line slowed. She gave a small nod, not in submission, but more like permission. To herself. Her fingers moved to the zipper of her utility jacket. Rudd folded his arms, clearly thinking he'd made a point. A few feet away, Officer Dana, older, quieter, leaned against the far wall, watching everything. She didn't speak, but something about her eyes changed, as if recognizing something Rudd hadn't yet. The woman unzipped her jacket halfway, then paused. Her movements were precise, almost rehearsed. She wasn't stalling. She was giving the moment weight. And in that pause, there was something else. Not fear, not embarrassment. Control. She slid the jacket off and folded it over her arm. That's when the murmurs began. Across her shoulder blade, just visible above the seam of her fitted shirt, was a tattoo. Not decorative, not sentimental. Functional. Marked in precise black ink, faded by time but impossible to mistake. A symbol only known to those who'd seen operations in the darkest corners of the world. A ghost unit. The kind not acknowledged by official channels. The kind whispered about behind closed doors. It was circular, stark, and deadly simple. A coiled serpent, blade through its mouth, numbers etched beneath in archaic code. Those who knew, knew. Rudd didn't, but Dana did. Her eyes locked on the ink. Her posture straightened. The old Marine in the back of the line let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Rudd, still trying to reassert control, reached for his radio. I need a supervisor to checkpoint B. We've got some unauthorized. She's not unauthorized, Dana said suddenly. Her voice was calm. Low. Rudd turned. What? Dana nodded once toward the woman. Put your radio down, officer. You've already said enough. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. And in it, the woman stood perfectly still, holding nothing but a folded jacket and a presence that was suddenly undeniable. She moved to the side of the hallway, jacket still folded in her arms, away from the checkpoint, but not retreating. She didn't need to. Dana followed with slow, measured steps. Not hurried, respectful. Rudd stayed behind, confused and increasingly frustrated. What the hell's going on? He muttered, eyes darting between them. It's a tattoo. Who cares? But the crowd was shifting. That symbol, it wasn't one civilians reacted to. But the few who had served long enough, deep enough, their posture changed. A man in plain clothes near the elevator stood a little straighter. His hand subconsciously brushed an old wristband, military issue. He didn't say a word, just watched. Dana approached the woman, stopping a respectful distance away. You still go by your call sign? She asked, almost in a whisper. The woman's expression didn't change, but her eyes, they moved. Not sharply, just a faint lift. I haven't used it in a long time, she said. Dana nodded. Didn't think I'd see that mark again. Not here. There was a long pause. Didn't think I'd wear it again, the woman replied. She wasn't trying to be cryptic. It wasn't pride. It was memory. The weight of it. From a distance, Rudd squinted. Wait, call sign. What are you two talking about? Dana ignored him. She lowered her voice again. You're not here by chance, are you? The woman didn't answer. She didn't need to. That silence carried too much history. Behind her folded jacket, clipped to her waistband, was a utility pouch, civilian issue. But the way it sat? Perfectly placed, no wasted motion. The kind of setup only muscle memory could maintain. Dana glanced once at the boots. Laced perfectly, but the laces weren't standard. Tucked. Double-wrapped. Combat style. You're here for the records office, Dana guessed. Not the maintenance wing. Still no answer. But Dana had all she needed. She turned back toward the checkpoint and gestured subtly for Rudd to step aside. Let her through. Rudd stepped forward. She still hasn't. She's cleared, Dana said, cutting him off. Not a request. A fact. The woman didn't move. She was waiting. Not for permission, for acknowledgement. And when it came, she walked forward. Not fast. Not proud. Just present. And for the first time, people made room. She moved through the checkpoint without another word. No beeps. No resistance. Just the whisper of boots against marble. Dana didn't follow. She stood still, watching her go, the kind of look only those who've served carry. Part awe, part pain, part reverence. And something unspoken. I thought you were gone. Down the hall, past rows of waiting chairs and glass-framed notices, the woman walked with quiet precision. Every step measured. Her folded jacket held like it meant something. Not utility, memory. A layer of who she used to be, now resting calmly in her arms. She reached the door marked archives and sealed records. Authorized only. Paused, and gently knocked. Inside, a clerk, maybe late 30s, glasses sliding down her nose, visibly overworked, glanced up. You need to schedule for sealed records access, she said automatically, not even looking. 2 weeks minimum. The woman stepped in and laid her laminated clearance badge on the counter. The clerk finally looked up. Her brows furrowed. This format isn't used anymore. The woman gave a small nod. I know. The clerk turned it over. And paused. On the back, printed faintly but unmistakable, was a series of initials and clearance codes that hadn't been used publicly in over a decade. The clerk looked up, really seeing her now. I'll need to call a supervisor. No need, the woman said, her voice calm. She slid a small, worn envelope onto the counter. He's expecting this. The clerk opened it. Inside, a sealed military tag, and a name, handwritten in block letters. Not the woman's. Someone else's. The clerk's hand shook slightly. She hit a button on the wall without saying a word. Behind her, a locked door buzzed. The woman stepped through into the secured back room. No hesitation. No fanfare. Just presence. Meanwhile, in the outer lobby, Officer Rudd still looked confused. He leaned toward Dana. "Who is she?" he asked. "Seriously, what was that tattoo?" Dana exhaled slowly. "She's not on any roster you'd recognize. She won't be in any system you can access. But I'll tell you this." She turned to him fully now. "People in rooms you'll never enter used to lower their voices when she walked in." And for a long time, Rudd had no response. Just silence. 3 hours earlier, she had arrived at the courthouse's side entrance, the one where contractors entered, unbothered by security. She wore the same khaki uniform. Faded. Unremarkable. She could have passed for anyone. HVAC tech, janitorial staff, records courier. It was intentional. She wasn't here to be noticed. She never was. Even her car, an old, sun-bleached sedan with rust spots and a cracked taillight, blended into the staff lot like it belonged to no one in particular. She'd made herself invisible for years. The front desk clerk hadn't looked up when she signed in. No one asked for her name. They never did. That morning, she had walked the perimeter first, not because she was cautious, but because her instincts hadn't dulled. She noted exit points, blind corners, cameras that panned too slowly. She did it without thinking, like breathing. But the truth was, she wasn't just avoiding notice. She was watching someone. Someone inside. Someone whose name was still buried in a sealed file beneath this very courthouse. A name that haunted the edges of her dreams, surfaced in classified communiques long after she'd been told the mission was over. She'd come for that file. And only one. But to get it, she had to wear the old uniform. Not for permission, but to remind herself who she was before she disappeared into the silence. Still, Rudd hadn't been the first to underestimate her today. In the break room earlier, 2 court officers had walked in while she was grabbing a bottle of water. They didn't notice her until she stood between them and the fridge. One scoffed. "Maintenance. Must be a diversity hire." The other laughed. "Or someone's cousin playing soldier." She didn't flinch. She didn't even look at them. Just stepped aside. Quietly. They'd walked past her like she wasn't even there. But later, one of them, the taller one, would catch a glimpse of the tattoo on her back and freeze mid-step. And that laugh? It would never come out again. Because there's something about truth when it reveals itself. It doesn't yell. It just stands there, calm and unshakable, and lets the world catch up. Back in the hallway, the buzz around the checkpoint had mostly faded, but not entirely. Rudd sat stiffly behind the desk now, arms crossed, chewing on the inside of his cheek. He was trying to make sense of what had just happened, trying to find a crack in it, some policy she had broken, some rule he could cling to. But there was nothing. Dana hadn't said another word to him. She didn't need to. Meanwhile, the taller of the 2 court officers, the one who'd laughed in the break room, had reappeared near the vending machines. He watched the hallway where the woman had disappeared through the restricted door. His expression had changed. He recognized the mark. Not because he'd served, he hadn't, but his brother had. And once, years ago, in a VA hospital bed, his brother had whispered about the shadow team. The ones who wore no insignia. The ones who came in when everyone else failed. The ones with the snake. He'd thought it was exaggeration. Myth. War stories filtered through morphine and trauma. But now, he stepped closer to Dana. Who was she? Dana didn't look at him. You should be asking what you almost said to her. He swallowed. Some legends aren't written in books, she added. They walk past you holding jackets you told them to take off. The officer backed away slowly, suddenly aware of how loud his presence had been. Across the lobby, someone else wasn't so cautious. A young woman in a pressed suit, city prosecutor's office, marched up to Dana, clipboard in hand. Who authorized her to access the restricted archive? She snapped. There's no one on today's list. If this blows back, Dana didn't even blink. You'll want to read Section 9 of the Security Protocol. Paragraph 4. The woman frowned. That hasn't been used in years. Dana met her gaze evenly. Exactly. The prosecutor hesitated, then lowered the clipboard. For the first time in that courthouse, people were beginning to realize. They hadn't seen a mistake pass through. They'd seen someone they didn't know how to classify. And worse, they had treated her like she didn't belong. But people like her, they never asked to belong. They just walk through the fire and leave it behind them. Deep in the archives room, the light was dim, humming faintly with old fluorescent flicker. She moved through the narrow aisles of metal filing cabinets like someone who had memorized the terrain. The hum of the courthouse above was muffled now, replaced by the quiet weight of memory, paper, and dust. The clerk had left her alone. No questions, just a key. She liked it that way. There was something sacred about silence, especially after years of operating in places where silence had kept her, and others, alive. Her hand brushed along drawer handles, eyes scanning coded labels. Then she found it, a cabinet marked redacted personnel/classified deceased. The key fit. The drawer slid open with a heavy metallic groan. Inside, just one file. A slim, sealed folder with a weathered black cover and a stamp in faded red ink. Deceased. Operation Strix/Level 7 clearance required. Her breath caught, not because she doubted it would be there, but because part of her had feared it would be empty, erased. Like so many others. She opened it. Slowly. Inside were two photographs. One of a man in combat fatigues, blurred out background, face partially shadowed. The other, a photo of both of them, years ago. Smiling. Back when smiles were still something they allowed themselves. Her hand trembled slightly as she traced the edge of the photo. He had been more than a teammate. More than a handler. He had saved her life 3 times. Once with words. Twice with action. And yet his name had vanished from every official record she could find. Until now. Outside, the courthouse rhythm resumed. Footsteps. Doors opening and closing. The indifferent churn of bureaucracy. But in that moment, she wasn't in a courthouse. She was back in Kandahar. Rain on metal. Red dust. The sound of his voice through the comms. Hold your breath. Count to 4. Then run. She blinked it away and closed the file. Not because she was finished with it, but because she already knew what she'd do next. She didn't come here for closure. She came to correct the lie. And in doing so, she would remind people, quietly, that ghosts don't stay buried forever. Back in the lobby, the air had shifted. Not dramatically, but enough for those with the instincts to notice. Dana stood alone now, arms folded, watching the hallway she had disappeared into. She hadn't moved in 15 minutes. Not to chase, not to explain. Just stood there, like a sentry. Rudd finally broke the silence. So, she's just allowed to walk through restricted files? Dana didn't answer. He scoffed, nervous. You're acting like she's some kind of ghost agent or something. Dana turned her head slowly. She is. Rudd blinked. She was listed Kia 9 years ago. I saw the cable myself, Dana continued. Only 4 people were copied on it. I was one. That shut him up. Across the room, the older Marine, the one who had first noticed her stillness, moved closer. He didn't say much, just nodded toward the hallway. She's one of them, isn't she? He asked. Dana gave a soft nod. Coiled Serpent Division. Off books. They handled recovery, denial, extraction. 0 exposure tolerance. Most didn't make it past 30. The Marine lowered his head. We heard whispers, but they always said it was just a story. Dana shook her head. Stories don't walk through security without being stopped. The Marine's voice turned quiet. And they don't carry that look in their eyes unless they've buried too many friends. There was a long pause. Then he added, almost to himself, we shouldn't have let her walk in alone. Dana's jaw tightened. She wouldn't have let anyone come with her. That's not how they work. Rudd finally leaned against the wall, shaken. What do they even do? Dana's eyes returned to the hallway. They do the things no one wants to admit we needed done. Down in the archives, the woman slipped the photos back into the file, sealed it again, and pressed her thumb against a chipped ink pad. She left her mark on the back cover, a simple print. Nothing fancy, just proof of presence. She closed the drawer, locked it, and slid the key into her front pocket. No one else would touch that file. Not unless they knew where to look. And almost no one did. As she turned to leave, she took one last look at the photo tucked into her jacket. Not for nostalgia, but for mission clarity. And then she walked out, the weight still in her posture, but her steps lighter than they had been in years. She emerged from the secured wing with the same quiet presence she had entered with. No fanfare, no announcement. But this time, people noticed her. They didn't know what they were seeing, not fully, but something in their gut told them they'd missed something important. Something that had passed within inches of them. A name never spoken, a weight never measured. The courthouse lobby fell into a hush again as she crossed it. The prosecutor who had barked earlier lowered her clipboard. The tall officer from the break room stared, hands now clasped respectfully in front of him, shame written across his features. Even Rudd said nothing. He wanted to. You could see it in his jaw, locked tight, like someone forcing back an apology they didn't yet understand how to deliver. She didn't look at any of them. She didn't need to. Her eyes remained forward as she approached the exit. But something unexpected stopped her. A small boy, maybe 10, was sitting near the far bench, waiting with his grandfather, the retired Marine. He looked up at her with quiet curiosity, as if sensing something others couldn't explain. The boy tugged on his grandfather's sleeve. "Who is she?" The old Marine didn't answer right away. He simply watched her walk, his eyes misted with memory. "She's someone the world forgot," he finally said, voice thick. "But someone who never forgot the world." The boy nodded, solemn. Just before reaching the door, she paused. It was slight, barely noticeable. But Dana saw it. And that pause, it wasn't hesitation. It was remembrance. A flash. Rain pelting steel. Gunfire in the valley below. A voice through comms saying, "If I don't make it out, make it count." Then gone. She stepped into the sunlight. The heat hit her face like a memory. The noise of traffic, birds, the distant hum of the courthouse behind her. But she didn't stop. Not until she reached the far corner of the lot, where her car waited. She opened the passenger door, reached inside, and pulled out a small, locked case. She hesitated before opening it. Inside, a worn sidearm. Disassembled. Clean. And beneath it, a folded cloth bearing the serpent mark, coiled, silent, waiting. She stared at it, heart pounding. Not from fear, but from knowing what came next. The sidearm rested on her lap, cool and familiar, a weight far heavier than its physical mass. Every scratch on its matte black surface, every worn edge, was a testament to battles fought in shadows few would ever know. It was more than a weapon. It was a chronicle of survival, resilience, and sacrifice. Her fingers moved methodically, assembling the pistol with the practiced precision of muscle memory. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion. The clicks of each part sliding into place echoed softly in the car's quiet cabin. This ritual was sacred, a tether to a past she neither sought to forget nor flaunt, but carried quietly like a scar beneath her skin. Her thoughts drifted backward, folding the years like a worn map. She was back in the blistering heat of the mountain ranges, where dust swirled around boots, and every breath tasted of gunpowder and desperation. The mission had gone sideways. Communications had fallen silent, and the world outside had stopped caring about the ghosts caught in the crossfire. She remembered the day everything changed. The day she lost more than just comrades. The day trust shattered like glass under fire. Her partner's voice came through the static of her memory, steady, ragged, but unwavering. "You've got this. Move. Now." She had taken the shot that saved them both, but it came at a cost. A betrayal, subtle and deep, from within their own ranks. A shadowy fracture no one wanted acknowledged. The scar on her wrist, faint now but still tender under the light, wasn't from training. It was from breaking free after being held captive, slicing through steel with bare hands and unyielding will. The tattoo on her back, the coiled serpent biting its own blade, was more than ink. It was a symbol of silence and warning, worn by the few who knew what it meant, those who had looked death in the eye and refused to blink. But this moment was not about pride or medals. It was about justice, justice for the forgotten, the betrayed, the erased. Her mission was clear, not vengeance, but truth, to expose the lies buried beneath layers of classified files and broken promises, to restore honor where silence had ruled for too long. She slid the pistol back into its case, locking it with a decisive snap. Taking a deep breath, she settled into the driver's seat, her gaze steady on the courthouse looming outside, impassive, unyielding, unaware that a reckoning was already underway within its walls. She was ready. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere had changed. It was no longer just a place of quiet bureaucracy and shuffled papers. The very air seemed charged with something heavier, something unsaid but deeply felt. Whispers floated through the corridors like a slow-moving storm. "Did you see her?" murmured one clerk to another. "That tattoo. I heard stories." Others exchanged uneasy glances, a mix of curiosity and respect woven with a thread of fear. Officer Rudd felt the walls closing in. He had always been comfortable wielding authority here, issuing orders, controlling the flow of people. But she had unsettled him. Her silence, her refusal to be intimidated, and most of all, that mark on her back. It was a symbol he didn't understand, but since carried weight. Every glance she cast his way chipped away at his certainty. The smirk he wore earlier was gone, replaced by a tight line of frustration. Dana stood nearby, her arms crossed, observing with quiet patience. She hadn't spoken much since escorting the woman through security, but her eyes never left the hallway where the woman had vanished. She knew the brewing storm, how long the calm would last before the pressure cracked the fragile surface. The courthouse wasn't a battlefield. It was meant to be a sanctuary for law and order. But today, the boundaries between past and present blurred. The ghosts of secret missions and silent sacrifices seemed to fill the hallways alongside the mundane complaints of paperwork and waiting rooms. The woman returned from the archives, her footsteps steady and purposeful. Clutched in her hands was a small file folder, worn at the edges but clearly important. The folder was her tether to truth, to the forgotten stories buried beneath layers of silence. As she moved through the corridor, the murmurs rose. A voice called from the crowd behind a glass partition, sharp with disbelief. Who authorized her access? Dana stepped forward, voice low but resolute. The clearance is valid, and this file contains information vital to correcting an error that has haunted too many lives. Rudd bristled, trying to reclaim control. We have protocols, procedures that must be followed. Dana met his glare evenly. Sometimes, she said quietly, the truth requires bending rules, not breaking them. Eyes followed the woman as she walked on, clutching the folder like a lifeline. The retired Marine nearby watched her in silence, pride and sorrow mingling in his expression. He whispered under his breath, "She carries more than scars. She carries the weight of all we lost." The courthouse doors opened, sunlight spilling in like a spotlight. She paused for a moment, then stepped into the light, not as a ghost, not as a shadow, but as a bearer of reckoning. The sunlight spilled across the cracked asphalt as she stepped out of the courthouse, the noise of the city greeting her like an indifferent crowd. Cars honked in the distance, a dog barked, and people moved past without noticing the weight she carried. But inside, beneath the calm exterior, a fierce determination had taken root, a quiet resolve born from years of silence and sacrifice. Dana fell into step beside her, the two women walking side by side through the sparse parking lot. There was no need for small talk. Their shared past spoke in the way Dana matched her pace, the steady rhythm of footsteps syncing like a silent code between comrades. "Did you get what you came for?" Dana asked softly, her voice almost lost in the hum of the city. She didn't look at her, but nodded firmly. "Enough to start. The records confirm what we suspected. The erasure wasn't an accident." Dana's gaze flickered briefly toward the courthouse's looming facade, an indifferent monolith of bureaucracy and secrets. "They've buried this deep. Too deep for most to find. Which means we have to be precise," the woman said, her tone unwavering, measured. "No mistakes. No attention. Every step must be calculated." They reached the edge of the lot, the sun casting long shadows behind them. For a moment, the city's noise dulled, leaving only the sound of their breathing and the distant hum of traffic. Near the entrance, the retired Marine, the quiet witness to their story, stood watching. His weathered face bore a look of quiet pride mixed with sorrow, the kind of expression only those who have seen loss up close can hold. Their eyes met for a brief second. No words passed between them, but the unspoken understanding was clear. The mission was far from over. She slid into her car and placed the small, locked case on the passenger seat, the serpent tattoo concealed once more beneath her uniform. But the legacy it symbolized burned brighter than ever in her heart. Turning the key in the ignition, she inhaled deeply, feeling the familiar tension in her chest, the weight of history and the promise of justice mingling in one breath. As the engine rumbled to life, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. This was not an end. It was a beginning. For the first time in a long time, she was ready to face the storm. And she wasn't alone. The courthouse hummed with a subtle but growing tension that morning. Though the daily routines continued, the shuffling of papers, the soft murmur of conversations. Underneath it all was an undercurrent no one could ignore. The story of the woman with the serpent tattoo was no longer a quiet rumor. It was a spark igniting whispers in every corridor and office. Officer Rudd found himself reassigned to the lobby, a subtle demotion he hadn't expected but welcomed as an opportunity to regain control. Yet, the weight of recent events had worn down his usual swagger. His eyes flickered with unease as he observed Dana moving through the halls with unshakable purpose, commanding attention without uttering a word. Her presence was a steadying force amidst the uncertainty. In the prosecutor's office, the tension was even more palpable. The woman who had earlier challenged the veteran's access sat at her cluttered desk, sifting through the files that the veteran had obtained from the archives. Each page she turned deepened her frown. This was not merely a forgotten case file, but a labyrinth of cover-ups and betrayals, a stain that reached far into the corridors of power. Dana approached quietly, placing a thick folder on the desk with a weighty finality. "This is why she needed access," Dana said, her voice low but resolute. "What's inside changes everything." The prosecutor's eyes widened as she scanned the documents. If this goes public, it could shake the foundations of this entire system. Careers, reputations, maybe more. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, the retired Marine watched the flow of people with a wary eye. His phone vibrated with a message from a long-trusted contact, an ominous reminder that the past they thought buried was stirring once more. Danger was creeping back, and with it, old enemies awakened. Inside, the veteran sat calmly in the waiting area, hands folded neatly, her posture composed. She was no longer invisible to those around her. Whispers followed her, covert glances were exchanged, and a few subtle nods of respect were offered by those who recognized the weight of her presence. Then, the atmosphere shifted again. A group of men in plain clothes entered the lobby. Their manner was purposeful, their eyes scanning the room until they fixed on her with unmistakable intent. One stepped forward, voice clipped but respectful. "Ma'am, we need to talk." Her quiet resolve did not falter. Slowly, she rose to her feet, facing them with the calm precision of someone prepared for whatever came next. The true test was about to begin. The men in plain clothes moved deliberately, encircling her with a measured precision born of years in intelligence and law enforcement. Their expressions were unreadable, professional masks carefully maintained, but there was an unmistakable edge beneath the surface, suspicion, caution, and a flicker of recognition that unsettled even their composed demeanor. "Ma'am," the lead agent began, his voice low but authoritative, "you've been accessing classified files without proper clearance. This isn't routine. We have protocols for a reason." She met his gaze steadily, eyes calm and unyielding. "I have clearance," she said quietly, the weight of her words pressing the air between them. "Granted years ago, for reasons that remain classified. The files I retrieved concern matters intentionally concealed from public record and from those within the system." A tense pause followed. One of the younger agents shifted uneasily, the quiet realization settling among them. This wasn't just another unauthorized breach. It was something far more complex. "We've been ordered to investigate all such incidents thoroughly," the lead agent continued, voice tight. "Any deviation could have serious repercussions." Her tone sharpened slightly, but remained controlled. "If truth is what you seek, then you must accept that it often hides behind layers of secrecy. I am here to bring it into the light." Dana stood nearby, arms crossed, watching silently. The tension in her jaw mirrored the stakes of the moment. This wasn't a routine investigation, it was a reckoning. The crowd of courthouse staff and onlookers had begun to gather, whispers spreading like wildfire. Eyes followed every movement. The shifting power dynamics became palpable as the woman's quiet strength contrasted sharply with the agent's formal authority. One agent produced a sleek ID scanner, its light pulsing softly. "Identify yourself. We need proper clearance confirmation." Slowly, she reached inside her jacket, retrieving a worn, laminated ID card. The emblem etched on it was the same serpent coiled in silence, the symbol that marked those few who walked between worlds, those who existed off official records. The agents exchanged quick glances, unease flickering on their faces. The lead agent's voice dropped to a near whisper. "You're off the books. That explains the absence in our system." She nodded. Truth often resides in the shadows, where official eyes fear to look. With deliberate care, She folded back her jacket sleeve, revealing the full serpent tattoo emblazoned on her back. Bold, intricate, and feared by those who understood its significance. The gathered crowd fell into stunned silence. That mark was not just ink. It was a silent declaration, a reminder of missions completed in secrecy, sacrifices erased from history, and a force few dared acknowledge. The agents stiffened, respect mingling uneasily with their caution. She locked eyes with the lead agent. "I'm here to finish what was started. No more lies. No more silence." A heavy silence hung in the air, charged, electric. Finally, the lead agent nodded slowly. "Let's talk." The silence that followed the unveiling of her tattoo was absolute. Not a single whisper broke the heavy stillness that filled the room. All eyes were drawn to the coiled serpent inked across her back, a symbol both feared and revered, a mark that carried stories no one dared speak aloud. The lead agent cleared his throat, his earlier suspicion replaced by a solemn respect. "You're not just any veteran. You're part of a unit most of us only know from classified briefings and hushed rumors. The coiled serpent division." She met his gaze steadily, her expression somber. "We operate in the shadows, places where no one watches and no one remembers. Our missions are erased before the ink on the reports dries. We're ghosts even to those we serve." A ripple ran through the crowd, disbelief, awe, and an awakening understanding mixing in the air. Those who had dismissed her as an unknown entity now saw the weight of history she bore. Rudd, who only hours before had sneered with arrogance, now swallowed hard, eyes fixed on her. His posture softened. The bravado that once filled his chest drained away, replaced by something far rarer, respect. The prosecutor, still holding the folder filled with buried truths, stepped forward cautiously. "The cover-up runs deeper than we imagined. These files reveal betrayals, omissions, and sacrifices deliberately hidden from the world." Her voice was steady, resolute. "It's time for the truth to breathe again." Dana placed a steady hand on the woman's shoulder, grounding her in the moment. "You carry more than scars," Dana said quietly. "You carry the voices of those who were never allowed to speak." The woman took a slow, measured breath. She was not here for recognition or praise. She was here to reclaim what had been stolen: dignity, honor, and the right to be seen and remembered. Slowly, the crowd's mood shifted. Skepticism melted into solemn respect. The challenge in their eyes softened into reverence. No further words were necessary. The silence itself spoke volumes. With deliberate care, she folded her jacket back down, concealing the tattoo once more. But the mark was no longer just on her skin. It had been etched into the consciousness of everyone present. Her presence, quiet, powerful, unyielding, had rewritten the story of the day. The day the forgotten were finally acknowledged. The room remained enveloped in a profound silence, the weight of the revelation settling slowly like dust illuminated by the afternoon sun. Whispers had vanished, replaced by an atmosphere thick with quiet awe and respect. For the first time in years, she was no longer a shadow or a rumor. She was fully seen, acknowledged by those around her. The lead agent stepped back, releasing the rigid posture he had held throughout the confrontation. His eyes, once sharp with suspicion, now softened with understanding. "We have been blind," he admitted quietly, "blind to the cost borne silently by those who stood in the shadows for all of us." Dana gave a solemn nod, her voice steady and filled with quiet conviction. "Recognition doesn't erase the pain, the loss, or the scars. But it is a start, a beginning of something long overdue." Officer Rudd approached cautiously, his gaze lowered in what seemed to be a mix of humility and remorse. The arrogance that had defined him earlier was gone, replaced by a newfound respect. "I misjudged you," he said quietly. "You carry a burden far heavier than I could understand." She accepted his silent apology with a subtle nod. No need for grand words. The gesture spoke volumes, a bridge mended without ceremony. Around them, the atmosphere shifted palpably. The murmurs turned into soft acknowledgments, subtle nods of respect, small, tentative smiles, and even a few hesitant claps. It was as if a silent chorus was rising, a collective recognition of the forgotten, the unseen, the unsung. In that moment, she felt a lightness, a release she had not known for years. Not because the battle was over, but because her truth, long buried and denied, had finally been brought into the light. Her gaze drifted toward the tall courthouse windows. The sunlight cast long shadows across the polished floor, painting the room with warmth and clarity. This was the first step toward justice, toward healing, toward reclaiming the dignity that silence had stolen. She folded her hands calmly, standing with quiet authority, a force unyielding yet humble. The room was no longer the same, and neither was she. The courthouse, moments ago filled with tension and suspicion, now hummed with a quiet, transformative energy. The whispered doubts and sideways glances had dissolved, replaced by a profound wave of understanding that swept through the crowd like a silent tide. Dana moved through the gathered group with the poise of someone accustomed to walking between worlds, between authority and empathy, between past and present. She caught Officer Rudd's gaze across the room. His eyes, once sharp with challenge, now held something different: acceptance. For the first time, he nodded at her, not in defiance, but in acknowledgement of the truth they had all witnessed. The prosecutor, still clutching the thick folder of buried secrets, stepped forward hesitantly. Her voice was low, almost a whisper to herself as much as anyone else. "This changes everything." She looked around at the faces, at the new gravity that filled the room. The cover-ups, the lies, they run deeper than we imagined. The veteran remained still and calm, shoulders squared, eyes steady. For years, she had carried this burden in silence, a ghost among the living. Now, with the truth laid bare, the weight shifted. Not all battles are fought with weapons. Some are waged in moments like this, through presence, truth, and unyielding dignity. Among the witnesses, some wiped away tears quietly, overwhelmed by the story unfolding before them. Others stood silently, letting the moment settle deep into their bones, feeling the invisible scars of those long forgotten. Near the entrance, the retired Marine watched with a subtle smile of pride. His weathered face spoke volumes. He understood the true cost of invisible battles and the profound honor in reclaiming a stolen story. Without a word, the veteran turned away from the crowd. Her movements were deliberate, steady, each step a reclaiming of her dignity and identity. There was no need for applause or words of praise. Her quiet authority spoke louder than any shout. The courthouse doors closed softly behind her, sealing a chapter that had long been kept in shadows. Outside, the sun hung low in the sky, casting golden rays over the city. The light promised renewal, hope, and the beginning of healing, for her and for all who had been silenced for too long. The evening sun dipped slowly behind the city skyline, bathing the streets in a warm, golden hue that stretched long shadows across the pavement. She walked steadily away from the courthouse, each footfall measured and deliberate. There was no rush, no frantic energy, just the quiet, unshakable resolve of someone who had carried an invisible burden for far too long. Inside the courthouse, the clatter of the day had faded back into routine. Clerks sorted papers, footsteps echoed faintly down hallways, and the hum of air conditioning filled the silence. Yet beneath the surface, the atmosphere had shifted irrevocably. The stories that had once been whispered in shadowed corners were now acknowledged openly, etched into the collective memory of those who had witnessed her presence. She paused at the edge of the sidewalk, taking a slow, deep breath. The cool evening air filled her lungs and seemed to carry away some of the weight she'd borne for years. It was not relief born from victory alone, for the fight was far from over, but from the simple, profound act of being seen and heard. A passerby crossed her path, offering a respectful nod, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but one that echoed like a thunderclap in her heart. Recognition, after years of invisibility. It was not the validation of strangers she sought, but it was a sign that the world, even in its smallest moments, was beginning to change. Reaching into her jacket pocket, she pulled out a small, worn photograph. The edges were frayed, the black and white image faded with time. It showed a younger version of herself standing beside a fallen comrade, faces set with resolve, eyes brimming with unspoken promises. Memories surged up, vivid but not overwhelming. They fueled her strength rather than dimming it. This moment was not an end. It was a beginning, a path carved out by those who refused to be erased, those who reclaimed dignity through quiet strength. Her serpent tattoo, once hidden beneath fabric and silence, was now a symbol of resilience and truth, a testament to battles fought in the shadows, for justice yet to come. She folded the photo carefully and tucked it back into her pocket. As the city lights flickered on, sparkling like distant stars awakening in the twilight, she stepped forward into the night. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a fragile, precious peace settle deep within her. Night had settled fully over the city, wrapping the streets in a cloak of quiet darkness. Yet inside a modest, dimly lit apartment, the weight of the day pressed heavily upon her. The glow from a single lamp softened the room's edges, casting long shadows that danced gently on walls adorned with faded photographs, medals carefully stored in glass cases, and other mementos that whispered the stories of a life forged in silence. She sat at a small wooden table, her fingers tracing the contours of the serpent tattoo hidden beneath the fabric of her shirt. It was more than just ink. It was a living emblem of sacrifice, resilience, and an unbreakable commitment to something far greater than herself. Each coil of the serpent symbolized battles fought in the shadows, missions erased from official records, and comrades who never returned. In front of her lay a worn, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. Each one was filled with neat, handwritten notes, the names of fallen friends, dates of operations, cryptic codes, and reflections penned during moments stolen from chaos. These pages held memories the world refused to acknowledge but that she carried close, a sacred testament to a past that shaped her every step. Her phone buzzed softly beside her, breaking the silence. The screen lit up with a message from Dana. "Tomorrow is another step. We're not done." She allowed herself a small, weary smile. The exhaustion etched into her face softened for a moment, replaced by a glimmer of hope and determination. This journey, painful and difficult as it was, no longer felt solitary. For the first time in a long while, she knew she wasn't walking this path alone. Carefully, she gathered the journal and a small, worn photograph, a black and white image of herself standing beside a fallen comrade, faces etched with quiet resolve and unspoken promises. She tucked these precious relics into a battered satchel, her fingers lingering over the edges as if drawing strength from the tangible connection to her past. Standing, she moved to the window and gazed out at the restless city below. The distant hum of traffic, the soft glow of streetlights, and the occasional flicker of neon signs painted a picture of a world vast, complex, and often indifferent. Yet within this sprawling maze of stone and light were moments like these. Moments where courage intersected with recognition, where silence was shattered by the power of truth, and where the unseen found a voice. She drew a deep breath, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat beneath the quiet surface. Beneath the fatigue and the scars was a strength that had carried her through battles no one would ever fully understand. Her story was still unfolding, far from finished. And for the first time in a long time, she was ready to face whatever came next. The first light of dawn filtered gently through the thin curtains of her modest apartment, casting a soft glow across the worn furniture and scattered keepsakes. Outside, the city began to stir, the distant hum of early traffic, the occasional chirp of a bird welcoming the new day. Inside, however, a quiet transformation was unfolding, one that was as profound as it was silent. She sat on the edge of her bed, the faded satchel resting at her feet like a treasure chest filled with memories, truths, and fragments of a past that few understood. Her fingers lightly traced the outline of the serpent tattoo beneath the sleeve of her shirt, an unspoken companion that had journeyed with her through battles, both visible and unseen. That tattoo, once hidden beneath layers of fabric and silence, was now a symbol of resilience and reclaimed honor. Today was different. It was the first morning in years where the burden of invisibility had begun to lift, replaced by the weight of dignity restored. She rose deliberately, moving with a calm grace that belied the turmoil beneath the surface. Carefully, she gathered the essentials for the day ahead. The weather journal filled with names and memories, the black and white photograph capturing a moment frozen in time beside a fallen comrade, and the faded but still significant ID card that connected her to a shadowed legacy few dared acknowledge. Each item was a testament to sacrifice, loss, and unyielding strength. a legacy she now carried with pride rather than silence. Opening the door to the cool morning air, she stepped outside into a world that was both familiar and changed. The crisp breeze brushed against her skin, carrying with it the scent of possibility. The city streets, alive with early risers and quiet routines, seemed to pulse with promise, a silent acknowledgement of battles fought not only in far-off places, but in the hearts and minds of those who refused to be forgotten. There was no need for recognition, no call for applause. Her presence alone was a quiet declaration, a testament to survival, truth, and the power of reclaiming one's story. As she walked, each step echoed with newfound purpose. The weight of years spent in shadows lifted slightly with every stride. She was no longer defined by what others had erased or ignored. She was a woman who had stood firm amid silence, who had borne scars both seen and unseen, and who now moved forward with quiet authority. The city lights flickered on behind her, like distant stars fading as the sun rose higher. Ahead lay an uncertain horizon, but one she was ready to face, armed not with weapons, but with the strength of truth and the dignity of a story finally told. Her journey was far from over, but as the morning light wrapped around her, she embraced this moment, a victory not shouted, but deeply felt, a quiet victory reclaimed in the steady beat of her own heartbeat. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive tactical stories.